Hi, Tanu. How are you? Welcome to AI for Business.
Hi, nice to meet you, Sarah. Great to chat.
Thank you. Same here. I was looking at your background, and you have a vast, diverse background. You've been a founder, co-founder yourself. You have been mentoring startups with Techstars. You have been in the product space for a very long time, and recently is Seldon. What I'm very curious to know is that I can't say since the advent of AI, because AI has been here for a very long time. But since AI has gotten more mainstream, how do you see it impacting your role as a product manager and managing product teams?
Yeah. I got into the AI space pretty early. I think I've been doing it for about 7, 8 years, well before it was mainstream, as you put it. I think the biggest shift has been first explaining to people what is AI has changed because now people just equate AI with chatbots like LLMs. Whereas before, the default would be robotics that people talked about. What AI means to a mainstream audience has changed, firstly. But quite a lot of it has stayed the same in terms of the work that we do, because at Seldon, we have done machine learning operation software. So it's when companies want to put models into production, and that could be any sort of ML models. So even in the past, we ended up in situations where our customers didn't really know what they were doing. We launched on the side of the software, we launched like educational content that people can engage with. So either it's live sessions with some of our solutions engineers, or it is pre-recorded sessions. We're basically telling people how to incorporate AI in production in their environments. And so I feel like that part has pretty much stayed the same. It's just that where we start from is different from where we used to start from. But we end up saying similar things because even when people want to put models in production, they don't always know what is the best way to productize it or productionize it. And we end up needing to provide a lot more support around that as well.
So before Seldon, what would you say were the biggest deployment bottlenecks that teams faced going from model to production?
Seldon really solves the problem of you have experimented with a couple of ML models and you're trying to put your model into production. Before Seldon, I guess that step is very much around training data, figuring out, is this model performing at the level sure that you're going to put it into production. If you are a small company and you don't have this problem so much because you could be relatively solved with something like a cloud platform like GCP or AWS or Azure, they have their own ML deployment options. But if you're a bigger company, say either an MNC or has always been more on the Fortune 500. So in those sort of situations, you have lots of different platforms that you're putting models on. And if you're, say, a big bank, you even have restrictions on like which models can share data across which types of departments. For example, your investment banking department cannot access the data from your trading floor. That's really when you need something like Seldon. So you're managing across either different types of environments that you're maintaining, or you're trying to do it across, like you have some teams working with AWS, some teams working with in-house data, some teams working with a mixture of those solutions. And so then you need something that manages across all of these various infrastructures, because it's really just DevOps for ML is the base of it. And then on top of that, we have tools to detect and interpret deck bias and interpret the drift or changes in your model behavior. And so that doesn't come until you have models in production that are going over a period of time. So you can see how they're shifting and changing over time to retrain, to modify, to make better.
What would you say is the real cost of shipping LM models not real time or late? Not just the dollar cost to it, but the business impact of it.
That depends firstly on the use case that you are putting into. So with some of our customers, for example, in the manufacturing space, if they are putting models into production delayed, then that has been seen to have delays in terms of their supply chain. So they can't get their cars out or they can't get their machinery out in time. And so that really does have a real cost to it. But in some of our financial services customers' use cases, those impacts are a lot more measurable. So, for example, one of our customers does not put models into production if it doesn't generate at least $1 of revenue per month. That is a big yardstick to have. So that means like if the model is deployed late, it's literally impacting the ability for individuals to make transactions or companies to pay their employees. It can have a really damaging ramification in millions, if not billions. And so they would take like latency into consideration as one of their top priorities. We also see it a lot more in the other types of customers that are more around e-commerce or retail, because they also need customers to be able to purchase things off their website very quickly, especially if you're talking about large MNCs. Again, if they don't allow their customers to purchase online, people are just going to go to a different retailer. So it can have, in different sectors, different types of ramifications. I think in financial services, that's the one where it's the most dangerous. And then the second one is the retail and e-commerce industry. And the third, in my 3 examples, is manufacturing. But then there's also healthcare. That cost is not in financial numbers, but it is actually in real people's health. For example, one of our other customers, they do medical device manufacturing. If that device stops working with machine learning models that they have running on the side or complementary to their device itself, then people could literally have heart attacks and not cover from it, because pacemakers are made with some of those technology as well. It's not just monetary, it's also like, it really depends on your use case. In some cases, it's about lives.
Got it. Understood. What are the different types of companies or businesses that you're currently helping or planning to help in the future?
I think our current focus has very much been in that niche of companies that need real-time machine learning in production and at scale. So we're talking hundreds, if not thousands, of models that they're constantly keeping up to date, and that is per company. And so the types of companies are really looking like financial services, neobanks, care manufacturing, insurance. That's the sweet spot we have, and we continue to want to go in that direction. We're not looking to pivot at the moment.
And how would you say Seldon reduces the risk and speeding up the ROI for in AI enterprise teams or enterprise AI teams?
Yeah. So you can think of it in 2 different ways. Either it's an efficiency gain or it's a pure revenue generating type of model. So those are the 2 main types of use cases we would group into. I talked in my previous answer a lot about the efficiency gains, and so the risk of doing it. On the other side, with the benefits of doing these types of ML models. So again, in financial services, if you have models that are doing price forecasting, for purchases in retail, you could think of an example around like the cost of eggs, for example. Some retailers have been doing a lot more dynamic pricing. When the demand increases, then price of eggs increases. Personally, I'm not a fan of doing that on a consumer level, but this is the kind of thing that businesses want to do. That's one benefit where they can charge more if there's a willingness to pay for a certain good. They can charge more for it. Other things you could do is do a lot more cross-selling. If someone is buying, say, a top, they're probably going to buy trousers or bottoms as well to match a set. So you could recommend related items. If you're a clothing manufacturer, in manufacturing itself, figuring out like what types of customizations people are making to their car purchases, as an example. If we're talking about a car retailer, they could then make that the default set of manufacturing for that type of car, because you're trying to predict what customers are trying to do in a way that helps to manufacture things at the better pace and a better quality of what you are looking to produce, right? So there's less wastage. So all of that could end up becoming more revenue generating and profit generating activities. So again, depends on the use case, but here the variance is large. I think because it's less about the tech and more about figuring out what is the extra thing that is going to convince people to pay an extra amount for what their needs are.
Well, having all of these benefits, why do you think still so many companies have models kind of stuck in notebooks? What would you say is the fix for that?
Um, I think first one is not being sure that you can rely on those models to predict accurately. So a lot of the times people are stuck in sort of research mode because one, they are picking the wrong use case to solve for. Two, they are looking at trying to hit a certain target of like, oh, it has to be 80% accurate at predicting what happens next
Mhm.
before it goes into production. And that might be too high a bar for the first round. Maybe you don't fully rely on all those decisions that it's making, but you use it to make faster decisions. So you would do models, put a decision recommendation in front of you as a decision maker, and then a human is deciding based on that whether or not to proceed with that decision. And we've seen some of that in the insurance use case. One of our customers is basically having a man in the middle to check, like, okay, has there been, this is the recommendation from the machine learning model that they have developed. Then there's a human that's actively checking, okay, am I going to accept this decision? Or am I going to use it to just flag that it's actually not a good idea based on what I've just looked through? Like, people forget that it's not a binary choice of like whether you rely on the machine learning model's decision or not, or whether you have someone looking at it to decide whether to follow it through. And then the third reason I think that people don't put models into production is because it's actually hard, and that's why we're in that space. I think it's technically difficult because you need to figure out how much more resources you need to spin up. Like, do you need to buy more servers if you're running your own data centers? Do you need to pay for additional compute if you're going through a cloud platform? And how often do you spin it up? Do you manage that more efficiently? Because the impacts are actually, again, both financial, but also there's environmental impacts because some of these ML models are gigantic. And so when you're trying to scale up a gigantic model, you're then looking at GPUs or TPUs of storage and data that you're processing. And that really lends itself to significantly more data centers being used in the world. And that can have more negative consequences because you might have to, as an MNC, be reporting on your carbon footprint. It's really a multifaceted problem. Although it starts off being a machine learning problem, it doesn't end there.
Mm. Very important notes and points, actually, that you mentioned. What would you say what signals tell you a company is ready for MLOps maturity?
I think that the first one is whether you have the resources in place. I'm talking like people. Do you have skilled people who are able to put models in production, manage them? Because it's not a side project. It's actually like maintaining your models, creating your models, maintaining your infrastructure. It often takes teams, not even just one person. And so if you have an engineer whose side project is to put machine learning models into production, and you're expecting that engineer to also write code for that ML model and other code, that's, I think, too much to ask. And I think a lot of companies are starting with that. And it's fine to start with that as a research project because you got to start somewhere. But if you're trying to put models into production, I think first you need to make sure that your teams are ready for that type of load, because managing models in production is a lot of effort. Whether or not you do it with Seldon, there is still so much to manage ongoing. The second thing is really on skills. And this part is getting harder because a lot of the times it requires knowledge of Kubernetes and low-level hardware management if you're going to do it yourself and not use a cloud platform. If you are going to use one of those that abstracts away the hardware, you still need someone who understands ML quite fluently. And these people are now hard to find. So
I'm
there is a
excited.
lot of, yeah, retraining in progress. And I think it's important to invest in the people
Hmm.
if you're going to go in that direction. And then the third part is really figuring out what tools and software you need to make this happen. So if you're looking at something like Seldon, we could help with abstracting that part so you don't need like 10 engineers to solve this problem. Instead, you can do it with 1 or 2, which we've seen be successful. But you need at least a minimum of 1 or 2 and not 0 and 0.5. So I think it's largely that is the biggest bottleneck, followed just figuring out like what is your process, like we talked about earlier. Is there any sort of decision making that you're relying as a binary choice between machine learning models making or not? Maybe there is a man in the middle.
Or a woman.
Yeah. Sorry, it was actually a technical
No, I
term.
know.
But
I
you're
was just like,
totally right. I should call it like person in the middle.
yeah,
That's probably a better way to say it.
or like a human in the loop or something.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, that's a different. Is that a different thing? Like human in the loop or like man in the middle?
Yeah.
Different.
There are
Okay.
different things.
Okay.
Yes.
All right.
Yeah.
We're here to
Man
change
in the
everything.
middle is
It's AI. We're going to change it. All of that too. There's a lot of women.
yeah,
We need to be able to, yeah,
it is so
read
true. Yeah. Human in the loop versus man in the middle, I think is like human in the loop means that you could have your entire loop done by the ML model or machine, and then at the end is a decision point, whereas man in the middle means there's someone in the middle of the process looking through that process. So there's like machine, human, and then machine, whereas human in the loop tends to be there's someone at the end of that loop. It's not, yeah. It's not fully interchangeable, but yeah, I guess you could in some cases. One is a subset of the other.
Got it. What would you say, speaking of like AI infrastructure, when selling that, what does the product market fit look like?
Yeah, for us, I guess it's different in every company that looks and seems like us. For us, it has been pretty much in that somewhat regulated or regulated industry where there are MNCs or large number, at least more than 1,000 people looking at higher amounts of revenue, maybe about 1 million. And specifically, most importantly, is the real-time aspect, because that's where we are best at. There are some companies that are good for batch use cases. We don't focus on it. We have the ability to do batch, but it's not so the place where we've invested and have expertise in. We can handle some types of batch use cases, not 100%, but with real time, we can quite confidently say that this is where we're able to solve for. So the product market fit is really in that sort of demographic that I'm describing. But it's hard for me to say in just demographics because it's actually more about the use cases and to make sure that people are able to put models in production and manage them. So having either the team that already knows how to manage and put models in production with our infrastructure and that algorithmic support that I described for detecting bias and interpreting results. But also, if they don't have it, we are able to upskill them with some of our educational content that we've developed. There are some companies that have the intention, but their skills gap is too large for even a quick not the place where we've invested and have expertise in. So we can handle some types of batch use cases, not 100%, but with real time, we can quite confidently say that this is where we're able to solve for. So the product market fit is really in that sort of demographic that I'm describing. But it's hard for me to say in just demographics because it's actually more about the use cases and to make sure that people are able to put models in production and manage them. So having the either the team that already knows how to manage and put models in production with our infrastructure support that we can provide, and that algorithmic support that I described for detecting bias and interpreting results. But also, if they don't have it, that we are able to sort of upskill them with some of our educational content that we've developed. There are some companies that have the intention, but their skills gap is too large for even like a quick retraining from our perspective. They might have to go and learn machine learning in detail themselves before they come back to put ML models in production. So it's more of looking at use cases and the people that are working in it. Demographically, those were the broad strokes that I've mentioned.
So speaking of, because we're focusing a lot on skill set and on the people side of it, and the ones with the skills will be able to kind of make the connections, what would you say is the first hire that the executive teams in these companies need to look at for those first hires to be able to build those capabilities fast?
Yeah. Here it depends on if you're going to use existing models. Like there are lots of open source models and source available models out there that you can repurpose and build. So if you're going to just modify it, then focusing more on an engineer who is able to do more DevOps skills is probably more important. Then you can sort of reuse the model and train it so you can upskill from DevOps into a bit more data science. But if you're going to build your own data science models from scratch, for example, if you're a math tutor kind of company, then your ML model needs to be built from scratch. In that case, I would say that it would be better to hire first a data scientist and upskill them in DevOps skills. So the other way around. Ultimately, the ideal sweet spot is someone who understands ML and DevOps so that they can bring the data science and the infrastructure together. But if not, then you need to think about, okay, do I want to repurpose a model and improve what already exists, or am I building from scratch? And so that would be, I think, my number one question for your decision point.
In terms of business value, kind of switching gears a little bit, what would you see, or where would you see enterprises wasting money on AI right now, predominantly?
I think lots of companies are just putting chatbots in as like trying to remove support human effort just because they can. And I don't think just putting a chatbot there is actually going to do that much, because to see is it really solving the problems that your customers are complaining about. And a lot of the times it's still like a non-ML model bot. Humans just go to it and say, like, can I talk to a human? And then you still end up talking to the human. You just have fewer of them, so you're in the loop for longer. But I've also seen some companies do it a lot better. And so, for example, from my own personal experience on my mobile provider that I use, I'm in the UK, I got a much better deal by talking to the chatbot that they've put in place. And then actually, when I called up to talk to a human, they weren't able to match the deal that the chatbot was offering, which I think is a bit... Yeah, like I don't know why they would do that, but for me, like I thought that was actually really fantastic as a consumer, because then I'm just going to chat with the bot in the future and get a better deal for my mobile plan. But those are the types of things where I guess it is worth looking at to see, like, if I'm going to put a chatbot and expect it to solve people's problems better, then I need to be really looking into what use cases I have, seeing that the most problematic questions that people are coming up with, am I answering them? Because just putting a version of ChatGPT on your website is not going to solve that problem. People are still going to need to talk to human if it's not trained on your data. It's not trained on solving problems for them. And ChatGPT can only go that far. So maybe it will answer like 1% of your questions or something, unless you have trained it. You cannot really have full knowledge of ChatGPT anyway. So I would probably choose a Hugging Face model that is open source, so you can see how the model is performing in the first place and how it's built, and modify from there. If you were going to do a chatbot, but just not put it wholesale just because everyone else is doing it.
The problem that I have with these chatbots is that they create the expectation. And so you're like, hey, great, there's this chatbot, he can now answer my questions. Then it kind of takes that hope away, because it's just like an automated Q&A with a link. It gives you a link. Go read that for yourself.
Yeah.
I'm like, if I wanted to go read that myself and, spend like another 10 minutes understanding your processes.
Yeah.
And then you say, can I talk to a human, like you said? And then some of them, even the chatbot does not connect you to a human. It says, hey, give me your email. This is my recent experience. We're going to send the answer to your email, and then a human is going to continue the conversation from the email. I mean, this is even more painful. Just
Yeah.
that out. I'm just going to go and email them directly to support.
Yeah. Yeah. I actually think that is a training problem because like you can have effective chatbots like I just explained with my mobile provider, but you just have to spend the effort and time to figure out what is the most problematic. Like as a product person anyway, you would be looking at what are the biggest customer pain points there are. And so based on that, you need to analyze use case by use case. Like, okay, most people are complaining about logging in, and so I need to improve the login flow firstly. But while I'm doing that, maybe the chatbot provides solutions on how to troubleshoot logins. Like maybe it helps you to have like a password reset, or it helps you to have a second factor that you can add on to your account, whatever that is. It needs to be very specific. So then you need to tailor the content that you're putting into your chatbot at training point, or at least retraining point, to be having proprietary information about your workflow or your software or your data that you already have. But sometimes, like I said, people just plump in like the ChatGPT masked just because it talks nicely. And that's fine, but then you're not actually solving most of your biggest use case problems that lead to support issues.
You know, as a user, what is my dream situation for all of those people? Because everybody understands chatbots. But for the companies out there that are putting chatbots on their system, I think the dream functionality that we want to see is not only understands the problem, but also goes and fixes it. So you don't actually have to, even if it needs to get control of the monitor, because sometimes internal help desks, you see how they take over your monitor and say, hey, can we take that over, go and fix it ourselves? How amazing would that be? If I'm sure that you're going to just do that,
Yeah.
just
I
something.
think that's coming, or like the intention that you're talking through is coming. So that's like
Okay.
the rise of AI agents. But again, they have to be, I think, really niche, because that AI agent needs to be really trained and be an expert in that particular type of thing. So you'd have an expert in account login versus you'd have an expert in billing. Those AI agents need to be experts in those various types of fields so they can come in and out of the chat. And I think that is coming. Um, at least it's in experimentation stages from companies that I've seen. People are looking into it. This is sort of what everyone was saying was the next frontier last year. So I think we're approaching that frontier already.
I would be so happy. And that brings me to the question about trust, actually. How would you say it can be a balance between velocity, shipping fast, and trust so that it doesn't break, the model doesn't break, both in terms of, okay, is the answer reliable, and is it going to actually do what it's supposed to do?
Yeah, I think this is where we go a bit more into the data science side of things. So far in the conversation, I've spent a lot of time talking about DevOps for ML, because that's what all bread and butter is. But we also have other sets of tools, like algorithmic libraries to be able to detect bias. And those are like drift detection, outlier detection, anomaly detection. And then on top of that, explainability. So trying to interpret the decisions that models have made. So here we would look at it at a per instance levels. Let's say you were browsing a clothing website and you wanted to buy a hat. In this scenario, if you were in the middle of summer and you were looking at winter wear, it should still show you winter wear recommendations, and other things that pop up on that page should still be about winter wear because that's where you are looking to be browsing, even though you're in the middle of summer browsing that, right? That kind of recommendation, you could be looking at your ML models for recommendation engines and saying, oh, well, as long as it's summer, provide a seasonal model for summer. So it should just be putting out things like sunglasses and sun hats and things like that. But actually. It's more important to be more relevant. And so I know I picked a very simple example. It's really hard to talk about bias in terms of hats, but what I'm trying to talk through is like where your model is drifting. So if your original model is supposed to be just handling summer use cases, but someone is browsing for winter wear, there should be a different route for that to take. And you would only be able to figure that out when there's a new anomalous person that is flagging that, I couldn't find related winter wear because I was browsing for winter wear in summer. It's really hard to figure that out. So you need to be able to look at outliers in your data to see, am I solving for those use cases? Or you could decide you don't want to be solving for these outliers. But personally, I think that's the point of ML, is that we have custom solutions for individuals. And so I think it's important to be looking at both the outliers as well as the drift in your data. So drift in data is different from outliers. I've just described outliers. But drift in data is more like when, let's say you're doing like a facial recognition software, and this software greets you every time you walk into a shop. And it's like, hello, I recognize you. Maybe something like Amazon wants to be with its shopping experiences, where you can walk into an Amazon Fresh, I think they're called, like a grocery shop, right? So you
Yeah.
walk in and you don't have to pay when you walk out. It just charges you directly. Let's say it says hello to you when you walk in with a facial recognition software running in the background. And this shop is located in Sweden, where most of the ethnicity of the people coming there is Nordic. So they all have similar shape and eye structure, bone structure, right? And the ML model would have been trained on that kind of data. Whereas suddenly, if you get a group of Japanese visitors to that shop, it doesn't know how to greet them, even though they're Amazon customers, because it's been trained on Nordic faces. That is when there is a drift in your model itself. It's like concept drift. So you were expecting that it will all be Nordic faces, but then there's actually a whole bunch of Asian faces that this model is not very good at detecting. And so you need to modify your model in itself, because this is not the only time you're going to have Asian people walking into your shop. It's just that most common use case is for Nordic people, but you still need to be adjusting. And maybe that is a seasonal thing. Like people come in the summer when it's warmer. Every summer, you need to have a little bit more of a different model that you apply. So this example, I think, goes a bit better in talking about bias in ML models, because if you're not training your models on specific types of data sets and you're just trying to throw internet data at it, the models are going to inherit the human biases that are in place in history in general. It then leads to lots of issues, because there's not just white people in the world. So you want your model to be able to handle a whole bunch of different types of ethnicities. It needs to be a bit more thought through.
Yeah, I feel this is kind of opens up a basically can of worms around other concepts as well, in how AI models will be more responsible in the language. If you're talking to a child, versus you're talking to a teenager versus talking to an adult. So I guess this needs a separate episode to talk about, but it's very interesting for me and exciting how these models are going to be trained into understanding all of the nuances of being human. Because yes, facial recognition is one thing, but then it brings with it, even the facial recognitions comes with a culture. Not all people who look the same are coming from the same culture even, right?
Yeah.
It's a lot of interesting nuances. Like, we humans have to spend a little bit of time speaking to someone, knowing, where they kind of come from, a little bit more about what their background is and all of that, to be able to find and fine tune in our mind the kind of language that we use to be able to build a relationship that is productive and, constructive, or just, pleasant. So there's a
Yeah.
lot of things I feel that is discussable. around responsibility and AI. It's a topic that I'm very, interested in. It comes to me every time. I would like to maybe ask one more question
Mm.
about kind of how Seldon works for a non-technical executive. How would you explain model monitoring, right, in a way that they care?
So, firstly, I also deeply care about responsible AI, and I think we need a lot more regulation, but that's a lot more for another topic.
Yes.
Um, in terms of how to describe ML monitoring for execs that are not technical, I think the first part is there are two types of monitoring to talk through. One is operational monitoring. So you're talking about things like uptime, SLA, latency, that kind of monitoring. That's important too. But I think maybe the root of your question is possibly coming from like data science monitoring, trying to figure out like when should I retrain my model, why should I retrain my model kind of stuff. So for that kind of monitoring, I think it's really like um, I don't think it's actually even a negotiable. Like if you have a model in production, you should be looking at monitoring your data and improving your models and that's because it's, the impacts are exactly what we talked about at the start of our conversation. Because if your model is not performing as well as it could be, I was purposely not trying to use the word accuracy because there's so many different ways you could be looking at model monitoring. There's things like F1 scores, mean variance, average, gradients. There's a lot of different ways you could be looking at ML metrics on model performance. Accuracy and precision tend to be the top few that people think about because they are words that are understandable in English and not just formula. So I think it's around figuring out what is the impact of my ML model not performing as intended to perform at, because the impact could be in millions. For example, with the financial services use case that I talked through earlier on, if someone is not able to make a transaction, company's reputation is at stake. Say if you were working with a big bank like JPMC or Deutsche Bank, if you are transacting through them and a transaction fails, you are going to seriously question that company's reputation. Even for a smaller company as well, if you're a neobank like Wise or Revolut, you definitely don't want your transactions failing because that a consumer, whether it is a company or an individual, is going to trust your bank less. They may not return if their transaction doesn't go through. And a lot of ML models are actually the background processing any sort of banking transactions. And so some of these are around fraud detection, but there are other ones as well, like recommendations for other financial products, things like that, that people are using. And so the impacts are either in terms of risks like reputational harm, loss of revenue, things like that. Or it could be in terms of lack of being able to monetize something that there is a demand for. And again, we start with the tech, but we end up with a non-tech answer as why it's important. So model monitoring helps you to prevent things like that. Like you're trying to have models that you can rely on and you believe you can trust to come to good decisions, whether you need a human in the loop or a person in the middle. You still need to know that the ML model is generally reliable, or that series of ML models, or that group of collection, or and you can only get that if you're constantly monitoring your models, both operationally as well as from a data science perspective.
So you've built a lot of products across different markets. What does it take, in your perspective, to win enterprise AI?
What do you mean by that? Is that like, I don't know what winning enterprise AI means.
Yeah, by that I mean to be able to convince the enterprise level that a solution that you're proposing or the product that you're
Okay.
proposing, because there is a hype, there's a lot of product that is thrown at business executives, right?
Yeah.
What would you say from a creator of those product perspective? Because a lot of my listeners are product founders that are building something for the business executive, for the businesses. What would you say from your perspective that they can win this they I don't want to call it a game, but they would win. They are actually solving a solution for at the enterprise level for the business user.
Understood. So I think it's a multi-part answer for me. The first is more of a sales enablement kind of question. Like, have you got the right champion in that company to fight for you? Because enterprise sales is different from consumer sales. Consumer sales tends to be very marketing heavy, and you want people to find you, whereas enterprise sales tends to be around like outreach and making sure you can find a champion or someone who is just advocating for you as a vendor in that company. Um, and so this could be a team of people, it could be one person, it could be two people, whatever it is, you need a champion. And for them to be the right level or be able to introduce you to the people you need at the right level. So that's like a very salesy answer. And the second thing I think you need is possibly looking at partnerships with other companies or service providers. So sometimes what's worked for us at Seldon is to partner with someone who is complementary to us when we go to a big company. So rather than just approaching them as Seldon itself, like it could be Seldon plus another company, we solve for XYZ problems better together. And therefore, you don't have to look for 5 different solutions that don't work well together. But rather, like, we've already spent the effort to integrate across these 2 products, and so are able to solve for a larger use case than just us alone, because we're a small company, um, compared to like a Fortune 500 company that exists that we would typically work with. And so looking at partnerships, and sometimes it's about services. So when I was talking about if companies themselves don't have skilled resources, like people who are able to understand both the data science side as well as the DevOps side of things, then probably they could get some help from a consultancy or a service provider to fill that gap in addition to getting your software. So you could talk about like a bundled deal executive as well in the big company. And then the third one is more of like figuring out like, uh, is this the right product market fit that you have? You asked the question about product market fit earlier. And I think a lot of founders and companies that I've seen and worked with in the past, they tend to forget about product market fit. It's not that product market fit doesn't exist. It does. It just constantly evolves. So what might be true for a company 3 years ago may not be true anymore. So it's worth relooking internally every once in a while to see, like, do I need to change something in the way I talk about my products, or has the market changed in some form such that I, founder, am able to adapt how I talk about my products in any way, or do I need to make product changes to adapt to that market? And so if you do have a product market fit and you have a compelling reason for the company to be able to adopt your tech and take it on, they will come for you. But you just need to find that compelling reason, find that champion to actually make that happen. And sometimes you have to partner with other companies to do that.
If we want to look at it from the product perspective, what is, and you've been a founder yourself and you've mentored founders a lot. From that perspective, maybe the question that will help answer this is that what would you say are the top 3 pains right now at the enterprise level that building AI solutions for it can actually solve those problems for these enterprises so that startups start with building the right solutions rather than building something which obviously doesn't work that way. We all know, build it and there's going to be they're going to buy it from us because we think it's good. That's not how it works. First, you have to figure what is the problem actually, whose hair is on fire, right? And then go build a solution for that. What are the top 3 major issues that you see that are solvable with AI at the enterprise level these days?
I think it's really hard to answer that, but
It's
I think that there are three main things that come to mind for me
Mm.
in types of ML models that are helpful for people. The first one is fraud detection. So you being able to see, like, am I getting fraudulent transactions happening in my software? And this lends itself most easily to financial services and insurance kind of use cases, but not exclusively to them, because almost every company at this moment in time has some sort of transaction that is happening online for them. And so I would care about fraud, because if you are getting lots of signups for your software, but it's not real, it's like a bot that's just going in and creating like accounts, even that in itself is a waste of money, resource, effort, for you to even be counting them as customers and then realizing, oh, they're not actually real customers. So I think fraud is something that will apply across all businesses um, to some extent, in some way or shape or form. The second one is probably around recommendation engines. Like, e-commerce is quite a wide set of market as well, because that's not just retail. It looks like it's just retail, but when you have a transaction that you're allowing people to do online, even if you're, say, a company that is like coaching or therapists that are online, they are still making transactions online. You're still booking in customers online. And those sorts of things are still forms of e-commerce, and recommending related software or products. All of that is still valuable. And then the third one is probably still support. I don't think chatbots are the right answer, though. But what I've said earlier about AI agents and having niche expertise, that could be a better answer. Still not sure if I'm 100% right on it, but I think that is something that most companies need, because over time, for most expert support staff, they are not going to live and be in your company forever. And you kind of need to have a way to transfer that knowledge either internally. So like an AI agent that tries to absorb the way your top performing support agent is working, thinking, maybe learn from how they're managing, like, their clients, that kind of stuff, to be able to mimic that or train your other staff is actually quite useful, because you could be training internally. And then that same agent, repurposed in a different form, could then be answering more difficult questions for your customers themselves. So this lends itself to working with your support staff in a way that is helpful. So I'm not talking about replacing them, but rather augmenting and supporting them with difficult answers. I think that is the top three that I could say.
I think that was a great answer. And it's going to kind of trigger a lot of fruit for thought and good thinking for founders who are actually thinking of what are, some of the areas for enterprises who want to use AI to kind of offer solutions for them that's actually useful. Thank you so much for that. As a last question, is there anything that you want to say about Seldon, the product, and something that you were wishing for me to ask and I haven't? Please feel free to share.
Thanks. That's a really nice catch-all. I guess firstly, if there is something that Seldon can help with, I'm always available, so if people can reach me on LinkedIn. Seldon does ML infrastructure, which is like DevOps for ML, and then has tools on top of that to help with detecting bias or understanding why your model decisions were made in that way, so explainability. And then secondly, I also have a consultancy on the side. So my co-founder runs it full time. But so through that consultancy, my co-founder and her team are able to offer a lot of services to help out with a whole range of things, thinking from a range of brand, design, marketing, as well as a bit more product management support, or um, engineering support, that's something that I'm happy to help with or chat with people about as well. And then thirdly, do offer mentorship as well. I've done coaching and mentoring as well. Right now through Techstars and previously from other accelerator programs. So if that's something of interest, then I have a link from Mentor Cruise that people can go through to sign up to have coaching sessions with me. Those are like 3 places where I could help with other companies if anyone is interested at all.
Amazing. I'll put the links down into the description. And is LinkedIn a good way for people to reach out to you? Message?
Yes, absolutely.
Awesome. All right. Thank you so much, Tanu. This was amazing. A lot of great learning. And I wish you the rest of actually it's weekend, right? I wish you what is today?
It's Monday.
Day. Oh my God. I wish you an amazing week ahead.
Thanks, you too.